Hi, my name's Vince Sheehan, and today I'd like to talk about Sibelius' 7th Symphony in C major. And I'd like to go through this extraordinary work exploring its form, because I do believe that having some understanding of classical music structure can greatly aid our appreciation and enjoyment of it. The Sibelius' first ideas for this symphony came to him around about 1918. He began to think of a 3-movement symphony then. But by the time this work was premiered in 1924, he'd pared his ideas down to one single movement. And this is the logical outcome of Sibelius's symphonic output. If you think back to the 5th Symphony, for instance, he was already conflating movements and paring things down. And when we get to this work of remarkable sophistication and with a wealth of thematic ideas, we come to one single movement. And it's short, it's about 22 minutes long at the longest. So it's a remarkable work, so dense, but so fresh in many ways as well. Now, Sibelius originally wanted to call it a symphonic fantasia. You can see why, with the continual shifts in moods, in ideas, in tempo. But really this symphony is Sibelius doing things on his own terms. There's not a set form in this work. It's not in sonata form or anything like that. Sibelius is letting his ideas be expressed onto the page, and he's forging his own form, his own structure, where his inspiration takes him. That's what makes this such an important and thrilling and wonderful symphony, and a fitting culmination to Sibelius' symphonic output. There was an 8th symphony, but he destroyed it. Maybe he realised that he took things as far as they could go with the 7th. Now, you can see the exact form of the work, how I see it, down below in the description with bar numbers. But with the opening section, this long adagio, we have this opening idea, which is simply a scale. And isn't that funny? And I don't think it's any coincidence that Sibelius decided to start this sophisticated symphony with the most basic building block of Western art music. Note how the double basses are slightly out of step by a quaver with the rest of the strings. It's an unforgettable opening to a symphony. Begins with a very soft timpani as well. And the timpani part in this symphony is magnificent. We then have this more melodic idea above in the flutes and bassoons. So on. And then we get this new idea. We have this dialogue between the winds and the strings. And so on. Then we come to this this rather extraordinary passage for strings, based on this hymn-like idea, I guess. We start with the violas. So on, very expressive, beautiful passage. There's rather polyphonic texture as well. Not polyphonic perhaps in the sense of Bach, but from an earlier age. I believe Sibelius was quite inspired by Palestrina, for instance. So there's a sense of these shifting lines always underneath the surface. We then come to perhaps the culmination of this section, where the brass comes in. And we hear this wonderfully noble theme on the solo trombone. This appears 3 times in its entirety in this work, and it acts like a kind of a marker, a signpost throughout this symphony. Helps always there at the most important moments in this symphony, near the beginning, near the middle and near the end. And the tune goes like this. It's often nicknamed the I Know theme, named after Sibelius's wife. So on, really beautiful, stirring music. So listen out for that, a very important idea in this symphony. We also hear this idea which a short idea. It always struck me as something that is familiar somehow at the back of my mind. And I suddenly realised the other day that it's an idea from Parsifal, one of the leitmotifs from Parsifal. And this work had a huge effect on Sibelius early on in his life. He's more ambivalent about Wagner as his career developed, but certainly near the beginning of his early years, he was very much under the sway of Wagner. And I wonder if this is a deliberate reference here to Parsifal. We then come eventually into the B section, un poquito meno adagio, a little less broadly. And this is more developmental. Those ideas we've heard in the first section, the adagio, are split up and passed around the orchestra. And the tempo, first of all imperceptibly, gradually comes quicker. We hear these descending ideas on the violin. Hear these descending ideas on the violins. And before we know it, we're into section C. It's got the character of a scherzo, and it comes back a couple of times later on in the form as well, breaking up this symphony. It's a kind of another signpost, a bit like the I Know theme. We start to hear this idea, kind of idea, again a dialogue between the winds and the strings. And then we hear this chattering idea, a bit like birds. This pizzicato strings. Soon the tempo marking as vivacissimo, as quickly as possible. This woodwind and string conversation continues. And then the music suddenly darkens and we hear this creeping chromatic idea. And so on. And this is where we hear the I know theme for the second time. Underneath that, those shifting sounds of those chromatic scales in the strings, the solo trombone comes back. This time the horns come in as well. Very impressive moment in this symphony. We then have a quick reprise of the Scherzo, very short this time. Again, those chattering strings. Then we're into section E. This is where we hear a new melody. And this melody goes like this. A fantastic tune. We come to a climax, then we have a brief recap of the Scherzo, just a few bars long, and then we hear that section again, E, but this time rather more developmental. We hear that tune, hear it in various keys, then it's kind of recapitulated, and we come to the final statement of the Scherzo. The last time we hear that music, and then we come to section F, Presto. Starts off these very quick crotchets, and then we hear these rising chromatic notes. Slowing down, and lo and behold, we hit the I know theme for the last time and the most magnificent time. The whole orchestra playing, and here we really get that sense of Renaissance polyphony. All these lines moving at the same time, sounding like a real wash, a glorious wash of sound. Really magnificent point in this symphony where we kind of reached the goal of this symphony, I suppose. But we also have a recapitulation not only of that theme but also of some of the other themes we've heard already, including that hymn-like idea we originally heard on the strings. Do you remember that? One of the most extraordinary passages in all the Sibelius music happens at the end of this symphony in this section. We hear this wonderful moment where the strings and the brass kind of come out of sync with each other in terms of their harmonies and then resolve. It creates the effect of a picture coming in and out of focus. It's amazing. This is the bit I'm talking about. Have a listen to this. You hear that wonderful way the music seems to drift apart and then coalesce back together again. It's really magical. I love that moment in the symphony. And it's used, of course, in the Sibelius notation program as well, which many people know it from. Then we come to the last section, which I call G, which acts as a coda, largamente. And we hear that tune, which I think's a quote from Wagner's Parsifal again. And I don't think we've heard it since the very opening of the symphony. And it goes like this. Remember that idea, that descending idea. And then we have a brief reminiscence of that opening wind idea we heard right at the very beginning of the symphony as well. And the whole symphony ends with this amazing swell of orchestral sonority, with the leading note, the C major scale, finally resolving onto the tonic, which of course is another building block of Western art music, isn't it? From the first symphonies. Well, here Sibelius takes it to its limit. And that brings this remarkable symphony to an end. Thank you for watching. Remember that the exact description of the form is below for those who like to follow the structure closely, like I do in classical music. And if you have any suggestions for pieces you'd like me to look at, please put them in the comments below. And of course, click like and subscribe if this is your kind of thing. Thanks for watching. Bye.